Slumpbuster, episode 55. Fuck COVID on 3. Ready? 3, 2, 1.
Slumpbuster. Quiet on the set. Make sure my mic is on. Eric, Dre, and Juju dog diving towards the pylon. Go for 2, so damn rude. Recognize authority. Spitting tips for fantasy. No way you're outscoring me. Bold predictions with conviction every single day. Sports addiction, no restriction. Kicking game like Pele. He's the greatest. What's the basis? Pick an athlete. Let's debate this game. Outrageous trading places. Sudden death. Take 10 paces. Turn and shoot. Boys the truth. Mamba mentality. Future greats take their place. Dreams become reality. Low and outside, knocked it out the park. Your boy discovered fire like a rock with a spark. Refs acting like Neanderthals. Phantom flags, nothing calls. Heartbreak losses, tragic falls. Every week discuss it all. Settle in, listen up. Free your time like Andrew Luck. Show's about to start. I suggest you buckle up.
Fuck COVID.
Fuck COVID.
You know, it just needed to be said one more time. Fuck COVID. Fuck COVID's mask. Fuck the horse it rode in on. I guess I'm just in a mood today. I'm coming back from the gym, and they actually are now requiring you wear the mask in between sets. And I got to say, when you're breathing hard and you're desperate for air after, like, racking up a squat rack, the mask isn't the most, like, appealing option exactly. Not exactly fun. So, yeah, I'm a little salty today.
Is it the same rules for, like, cardio machines? Like, do you run 5 miles and then you got to slap your mask on right away?
See, I saw people, like, on the treadmills. There was kind of a mix. There was, like, one guy had his hanging off. There was one guy with, like, a mask on. And then there was Future with mask off. Got my mask off.
My gyms aren't even open yet. I'm from New York. They're not even going to open for probably another month. So at least you get to go there.
Guess that's true. You know, it's just getting a little bit too flabby just waiting around these last 3 months. So I guess I'll take that with a grain of salt too. Like, but they also talk about in the New York area, like, opening up stuff, right? Like, they were talking about training camps being there. The Yankees were talking about just staying up there as well.
Right,
like,
yeah. So all the facilities are opening up. They got to abide by the rules. But with, like, the regular world, barbershops opened up today. Restaurants opened up, outside seating. Yeah, all the training facilities are pretty much good to go for the sports teams.
All right, guys. Well, you know, we start off with just a little rant here. I just got to get out of the way. Obviously, I'm Juju Talk Sports. This is my co-host, MMA Dre, Aundre Huynh, whatever you choose to call him. And then our guest on today's podcast, Mr. Anthony Figliozzi of the Halftime Podcast. Welcome to the Slumpbuster. Woo!
Thank you guys very much. It's been a while. It's been a while. We connected on Instagram. I'm very happy we got to do this.
Absolutely. I mean, after you guys were dropping those dope-ass shirts you had, I figured you might as well have you talk about it, you know. We'll get into those shameless plugs. We'll tell people where to get those, like, nice fancy shirts. I keep asking Dre to get us shirts, but he's just so scared to open up the budget. I don't know what it is about that.
Juju, we don't have a whole lot of money, and then my connect just moved to Colorado, okay? So it's going to be a while till we get fancy shirts.
Hey, listen, guys, I'll see what I can do. I'll try to get one shirt out to New Mexico, one shirt out to Austin. How's that sound?
That sounds good to us in the meantime.
Yep.
And come on, Dre, we got that Manscaped money coming in.
That is true.
The number one in men's grooming, below the waist grooming. Just to clarify here, got the Lawnmower 3.0. We got the Boxer Briefs. And if you use promo code SLUMP, 20% off plus free shipping and handling. So just go ahead and hit that promo code. Also check out Razor Sports, by the way, because you need to be up to date in your sports gambling. You got to throw in the sponsors here at the front, you know, just so people are clear. Promo code SLUMP. I'm just going to slip it into every, like, little category today, just so, you know, we just instill that in people's minds. We did have some good news in the sporting world. Today is not the worst day, I guess, to have a podcast, particularly because, well, I've been ranting the last few weeks. I've been raving. I've been pissed because MLB has been so frustrating, guys. But we finally have some resolution. Yep. We're going to have a 60-game season, 60 games for baseball. It's like going from a marathon to running a, 40-yard dash, but I guess we'll see how things go with this baseball season. I'm sure there's teams that will get some sort of advantage. The Astros still get the advantage that they don't have to deal with crowds to boo them. At least, there's a win there. It's not a complete loss for every team. Teams will be reporting to their facilities on July 1st to begin training camp to begin the season. I'm excited we'll get to see play. I'm excited that the teams are back. But it was a long, vicious road to get here. And I got to say, sets a poor precedent for labor negotiations here in 2 years when they actually have to negotiate their CBA. Now, Anthony, what did you think of all the chaos that got us to this final resolution here today?
In regards to the MLB, just an absolute, I don't know if you guys saw what we posted the other day on our story, but just absolute, like you said, chaos, just a terrible look. They're not the only league that is going through something like this. The NFL is still figuring out. The NBA, even though it took a while, made a plan and figured it out. The NHL figured it out. I don't know why it took this long for Major League Baseball to figure it out. There's clearly a disconnect between the players and the owners. They do not trust each other. But I have a question. So they started with 114 games. All of it was prorated salaries, 114 games. Then it was 82. Then it was 70. Then we came to the conclusion that they were going to do 60 games. They rejected it. And then it turns out they're doing 60 games anyway. What exactly happened between A and B? Between them rejecting the 60 and then continuing to do 60?
From my understanding, this is just Rob Manfred and the owners officially just kind of like putting their foot down and stopping at 60 games. And at this point, it's just a matter you either show up for work or not.
That's what I thought.
That's basically what it is. It's laying down the hammer. And the players technically in a lot of their original proposals actually did want more games because they're still getting at that prorated salary, right? And if you're the owners, the tough issue for them, and particularly in the way that baseball makes money, is by, fans being in the stands. Unfortunately, without that happening this year, the owners are absolutely eating money each and every time they have a game. So that's why even 70 games was kind of like a tough kind of sell for the ownership groups in regards to that. And hey, I'm not going to shed any tears for billionaire owners, but at the same time, as fans, it's also tough for us to shed tears for millionaire players who are literally playing our dreams each and every time they go out on the field. And the difference between, if you're Blake Snell making $10 million and making $5 million to play less games is kind of hits a little bit closer to home for fans. Dre, did you have a take on the kind of unrest going on in baseball?
Yeah, I think it's just disappointing if you are a baseball fan and that, you would have hoped, similar to what Anthony said, is that they would have come to an agreement a lot sooner. We saw all these other leagues already starting to make a move. And then, baseball as well, they sort of had the opportunity in that they didn't have to pivot during their season, right? Like they were still in their preseason and they could have been making all of these plans. They could have been negotiating with the players, coming up with contingencies. And instead, they sort of just wasted the majority of the spring and even a little bit of the summer. So I do think that it is a little bit disappointing if you are a fan of the MLB and if you are looking forward to baseball. What I will say, though, is I am excited about the shortened season down to 60 games. I do think that it makes baseball games more impactful. It's a little bit hard when you've got 100+ games that you're watching throughout a whole year. It's like, okay, does it really matter if I go to the 30th game in the season? Now, hey, that's halfway through the season. So yes, it does matter tuning into that 30th game. So I do find that a little bit interesting. I'll definitely be keeping a little bit more of an eye on baseball just because, like I said, the games have more impact. What I do worry about, though, and we talked about this a little bit before the show, is that they're not doing this in a bubble like the NBA has proposed. And I know some people have even mentioned, can the NFL do it in a bubble? I don't think that that's an option. But we already know that some of the Angels players got sick, a few other players from a few other teams. And so them not operating in a bubble, right, the players are still allowed to basically go out and live their life in whatever city that they live in. I just worry that the risk of COVID sort of infiltrating the teams and the league is just a little bit higher than, let's say, like the NBA and the UFC's plan. So that's my one major concern.
Absolutely. The last thing you want to do is place a player on the DL for a COVID-related illness. I guess my concern back when Blake Snell originally, and keep in mind, the MLBPA players, they voted on how the medical reasons would have been handled out today. So everyone's in agreement, at least on that. Owners, commissioner, players. So at least that's been settled. There is always that possibility, but I guess that's just kind of how we're going to have to live as a society until we actually have legitimate resolution to vaccines and etc. And particularly when it comes to the sport of baseball, because it would have been a tough thing for baseball to just not have a season altogether. And we were looking at that. The amount of money not only lost by the owners, but lost by the players in this year would have been pretty damaging, would have been pretty hard to swallow. Now, in terms of being competitive, the competitive aspect of it, baseball, you're right, is based off more of, there's going to be more importance in those 60 games. That's for sure. But baseball's always been more of a grind in general. So there's teams that start slow, like last year's World Series champion, the Washington Nationals, who before the All-Star break were below 500. So now whoever starts the hottest, definitely has the opportunity to potentially steal a World Series championship. So I guess the next question is this year's champion going to have a firm asterisk mark next to their name?
That's a great question. And I just want to, you guys made really, really good points that I want to just expand on. So Aundre said that the 60 games actually is quite good for baseball because 162 games, I was listening to the Michael K show today, and he said that with the 162, yes, it's kind of hard to put emphasis on each one, but it weeds out the fake team. There's been a bunch of teams, they go 50 and 30, and then they end the season 71 and 91, and they miss the playoffs. And like you said, a great point. The Washington Nationals were 19 and 31 in their first 50 games, and they end up winning the World Series. As opposed to the asterisk part, I think that it's going to have to be with all the leagues that are operating in this function. The NBA, there's 8 regular season games before they decide the final standings. Even the NHL, I'm pretty sure, I think they're just going straight into the playoffs.
But at least for those 2 leagues, they at least had the majority of their regular season completed prior to announcing they'll just jump straight into the playoffs. We know what the good teams are in those leagues. I mean, we're all pretty much in unison. The Lakers, Bucks, Clippers are going to kind of be in that like top mix.
Right.
Whereas baseball, there's still a lot of unknowns. Who's good this year?
Right. And that's the nature of the NBA. The NBA has always been, especially in the past 10 years, very top heavy. So that I think there was 20 regular season games left, and they're cutting it down to 8. So that's not really going to make much of a difference. They're putting 13 teams in the Western Conference instead of 8. That's not really going to make a difference. You got the Kings, the Pelicans, the Spurs. They're not going anywhere. But to get back to baseball, I think it's going to have to look a little differently. Now, from the standpoint of a Yankee fan like myself, it's a good thing because Aaron Judge is getting healthy. Stanton is getting healthy. You're not using Cole's arm as much. Another thing they said on the Michael K show is that a great bullpen is going to be very vital because maybe you're not going to throw out your starters 7-8 innings a game. And he also said that you might want to use, are utility players going to be a thing in this season? Are your starters going to play 50 to 55 games and they only get a couple of days rest? It's going to be very interesting. I want to ask you guys a question. Did either of you get a chance to watch the new 30 for 30 Long Gone Summer with Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire?
Unfortunately, I still have to mark that off my bucket list. I was still unwinding after the Bruce Lee documentary. ESPN's just been pounding us with documentaries week after week. I have to get done with my viewing list first.
Yeah, I still have to, because everything has been crazy the past month. I still have to cover The Last Dance. I don't know if you guys touched on that yet. But did you guys speak on that?
Yeah, we talked about every single episode. We loved The Last Dance, man. It was fantastic.
Was it not the most perfect opportunity for ESPN to bust that out?
Oh, it was perfect. Perfectly timed, nothing else going on. ESPN really has been killing it with all of the documentaries that they've been releasing.
I'm not a show watcher. Like, I'm not one to go on Netflix and, binge seasons. But you put, my anything Michael Jordan, Chicago Bulls on every Sunday night, I'm watching it. But anyway, with Long Gone Summer, the one point I just wanted to make, it was a very interesting documentary. But what they made a point of in the beginning was that in 1994, the MLB went on a strike. And because of that, the next season in 1995, there were a lot of fans who, because the MLB went on a strike, they said, I'm not watching this anymore. I don't want to see this product. And what saved the day? The steroid era. Well, yeah, exactly. The steroid era. Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, the list goes on. Obviously, that's not an option anymore. For them to not have a season while the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL are all going on, and I said it in my story yesterday, I'm not exactly sure if they would be able to recover from that, especially with all the money they're losing this season.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge disappointment even just seeing playoff basketball in the sense, or playoff baseball in the sense, those crowds, in October, they're just something magical in the air. And just to not have that vibe in the stadium or a ballpark, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. What about you, Dre? What's your take on this year's champion having an asterisk mark on their name?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting points that you said, right, about like teams heating up, right? Maybe they get off to a slow start. And I will say I'm not as well versed in baseball, so I don't know how dramatic of a difference that is. And I imagine it'll be something similar to basketball. I think the statistic is 70% of teams that make it to the playoffs in basketball have a top 8 record going into like the 10th week or something like that, right? Or sorry, not the 10th week, like the 10th game or something like that, right? So you know pretty early on which teams are going to make the playoffs, which teams aren't. And so with baseball, I'd be interested to see if it's something similar in that, like, hey, It's just, like you said, Juju, whoever gets off to the hottest start and can sort of keep that momentum through, this shorter game. It's really a sprint compared to, the regular season that MLB has. If those teams just happen to sneak in, even though they might not necessarily be as talented or as good as we would normally expect an MLB playoff team to be. That being said, I don't know if I agree with, putting an asterisk next to any of these leagues. I think for me, it shows that they're able to overcome that adversity, right? And so they're able to operate in this weird environment. And I think that's a part of it is like, yeah, you could say things aren't as they normally are. And maybe, the dynamics of baseball change a little bit. But I think that's what adds to being a great team and a great organization is, can I operate in this environment when, all the cards are stacked against me or whatever it is, right? They're on a level playing field and everybody has to abide by these rules. And yes, it sucks. We're in a crappy environment. No, you don't get a hometown crowd, but still, right, you got to do what you got to do to win. So I would argue that no, there should not be an asterisk when it comes to MLB or any of the other sports leagues.
Anthony, I got to mention a point that you mentioned earlier, and I agree with you. The Yankees are in a perfect spot given the situation that a lot of their best players had an opportunity to get healthy. 60-game season really benefited them. Other teams, I think this could benefit. So those wily Astros, now that they don't have to deal with the added distraction of what's going on in the crowd. I am also disappointed that we won't get to see that home environment when the Astros take it up to New York. Now, that is going to be one of the most devastating losses on the season. I will say this as well. Probably one of the biggest things that the owners should be more scared of is if this 60-game season is super successful, because if it is, then the narrative that's going to be put out there, well, maybe baseball should just shorten the season anyway. And you know what happens when you shorten a season by over 100 games? All that money in your pocket tends to disappear.
Right.
By the way, it doesn't only hurt the owners in that situation, it hurts the players. So, it's a balance there that I think a lot of owners and players have to consider it when that narrative does eventually get pushed down the line. Any closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'll make a couple points. So what you said about the Yankees, it does play right into their hands. But I just want to talk about in general these leagues that are affected by the coronavirus, and Aundre touched on it. I think the teams that are going to be the most successful in baseball, I'm not a huge hockey fan, so I can't really speak on that, but I feel like it's the same. And in basketball, I think the teams that have veterans on their team to kind of, bring everybody. I think the young teams, like I wouldn't be surprised if the Bucks came out in these 8 games and struggled a tad. They are a young team. I think a team like the Lakers, the Clippers, and it also plays right into the Clippers' hands because they're getting healthy. But I think the teams that have the more veteran presence, they're going to kind of hold the whole thing down and just say to the younger teammates, like, hey, I know it's weird, you never dealt with this before, but you got to be locked in. You got to be focused. We got to play just like any other season. Baseball, they started spring training in the beginning of March. Imagine just stopping that. And then you come back in July and you got to do 3 weeks and boom, you go right into the fire like that. And then from July to August, you just got to, win as many games as possible. You have to have some sort of leadership. And another thing I just want to say is I'm a huge LeBron James fan. Huge. And I know for a fact, if he wins the finals this year, nobody's going to give him credit. Nobody's going to give him credit that he deserves if he goes out and wins it. Oh, it was coronavirus. There wasn't any home team. I don't want to hear it. Whoever wins, good for you. It is what it is. The fact that Corona made all this stuff happen is another challenge. It should look better on you if you win the championship in this type of environment. Keep getting lucky. Okay,
unplanned topic there, but that is an interesting thing to talk about here with LeBron James. King James, as he kind of establishes his road towards potential GOATness, if he does win a championship, I don't think it should be affected at all based off the fact, like I said, basketball practically finished their regular season. You mentioned there's really only stripping away 12 games, and you still have to do the normal route to the playoffs. If they would have went with a lot of those crazy playoff formats that they were talking about early on, maybe you could have made like the case like, okay, well, this would not happen in any other given year. But if LeBron comes back after this layoff, beats a healthy Kawhi, a healthy Paul George in the Clippers, and then beats Giannis in the finals, How are you going to take that away from him, right?
Which he did the weekend before coronavirus happened, in the same weekend.
God. I was watching that game, and it was fucking fantastic. And yeah, I mean, we actually have a Lakers fan on this like episode here. So Dre, your thoughts on King James?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Lakers fan, you know, and for a long time I always hated on LeBron James, but it was because he was so good, right? And he would beat so many teams. And now that he's on mine, I'm like, okay, I support him. But no, I think you're exactly right, Anthony. You too, Juju, is like, the dude has accomplished so much this season. He's having an MVP caliber season, and that's having to share, you know, time with Anthony Davis, who is also having a fantastic season, arguably his best season that he's had. And then, you know, the fact that, yes, they just beat the Bucks, they just beat the Clippers prior to, you know, having this long extended break. So that proves like a lot of the narrative was, oh, they can only beat up on the easier teams, and then they lose against the tougher competition and the Bucks and Clippers, which they did, right? Like, I got to admit that they took their losses, but I think they were heating up at the perfect moment. And that's what I'm most disappointed about with this COVID break, is that I thought the Lakers actually were developing really good momentum going into the playoffs. I think they were peaking at the right time, and I think it sort of messes up that rhythm. That being said, I think, you know, going back to your point, Anthony, about the veterans, is a guy like LeBron James, and I think Anthony Davis, who now has some more playoff experience, been in the league for a little bit. They got Danny Green, all these guys. I think they're really going to be able to dial back in and say, hey, we got to flip that switch, you know, and this is just like any other year. So let's get back into it. I worry about the shape and conditioning that a lot of these players are in, but at the end of the day, I really do hope the Lakers win it. And if they do, you're exactly right. I don't want to hear crap from anybody about, oh, you know, this is a shortened postseason or it was a shortened regular season, any of that stuff. No, like, it's still hard to win it in this environment. And, you know, depending on how they seed the bracket and stuff like that, it can even be a harder playoff format than when he's had his teams in the past of like, oh, it's just the East and the West meet up at the end.
Everything he's won has had an asterisk on it. People like to hate on, like you said, you hated LeBron. People hate on greatness in the moment it's happening. Everybody hated Kobe. Rest in peace. Everybody hated Kobe. Now everybody loves him. In 2012, LeBron wins. Oh, he beat a young team. 2013, oh, Ray Allen saved him. 2016, oh, Kyrie saved him. I mean, can we give this man some credit? That's all I'm going to say.
Perfect closing remarks. All right. Well, that's a perfect transition into just discussing the subject of the NBA. But first, a quick little break for Manscaped.com. Promo code Slump.
This is a message brought to you by the Foundation for a Perfect Package.
Why do I need Manscaped?
Why do I need Manscaped?
Why do I need Manscaped?
Because the only frill I want is the one up top.
Because being in a relationship is not an excuse to be lazy.
Because I like talking ball, not smelling like them.
Because deforestation is proven to prevent forest fires.
Manscaped is the only brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming.
Manscaped's Crop Preserver guarantees that you smell your best all day long.
Manscaped Boxer Briefs are the most comfortable underwear on the market.
Manscaped's advanced skincare technology makes nicks a thing of the past.
Manscaped is the #1 in men's grooming. Subscribers get 2 free blade refills every 3 months. Get 20% off plus free shipping and handling with the promo code SLUMP at manscaped.com. That's the promo code SLUMP at manscaped.com. Get your Lawnmower 3.0 today.
We are the Slumpbusters.
And we approve this message.
And we're back. All right. So NBA restart plans are ready to go. We talked about it a little last week. Since then, not too much has changed other than KP gaining a little bit of a war of words again with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. According to Kendrick Perkins, if you were to put Kyrie Irving's brain inside a bird, that bird would fly backwards. Now, that doesn't answer the question if the earth is flat or not, but we'll leave that up to Kyrie to explain to us in a later episode. We could get Alex Jones and Eddie Bravo to jump in on that as well. You know, we talked about the Lakers before the break there, and you know, it's not just relegated to Kyrie. There was also a lot of Lakers that jumped out into the forefront to also say that maybe they were a little hesitant to jump in on the relaunch plans. Dre, since we talked last week about this, how has anything really changed on your stance? We were kind of taking more the Austin Rivers side of things.
No, I still take, you know, that sort of Austin Rivers route of like, hey, I think it's in the best interest of everybody for the NBA to continue. I think, you know, you and I were talking from the social aspect that I think players, they just have a greater platform of like, hey, I want to promote my cause, you can do so by having your interviews or wearing t-shirts. The league totally allows that. They give the players a voice. And for these lesser paid players, right, your ones that are not a superstar, I think that that's the only way that they're truly going to have a voice. Fewer people listen to them on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever platform that it may be as compared to a Kyrie Irving. So I'm still in favor of the Austin Rivers, hey, let's get back to play. What I will say has changed for me is the whole COVID sort of thing going on, right? Of like, hey, can the logistics behind a bubble in Florida really work, right? And the more that I think about it, just the more difficulty that I see the league having when it comes to restarting. And that, like, we just heard Nikola Jokic, he got diagnosed with COVID. I know that there's still a month, right? But like, how soon can he come back? And then that's really going to hurt Denver, right? Like, they were sitting pretty right now. And now it's like, hey, we don't get Jokic back for maybe another week or two into this whole thing, right? That could be that full 8 games that we possibly lose him. So I think that hurts Denver a little bit. And then just the whole logistics of like, once you're in this bubble, you're not leaving, right? So your family, school's starting back up here in August or September, depending where you live. It's like, are you away from your kids for that long? I know like LeBron James, he loves watching his kids play basketball. Well, now you're going to have to maybe just zoom in and watch from afar rather than being there to actually cheer him on in person and take him to school and all that stuff. So I do think that just adds to the complexity. And then not only that, but Florida having some more increases in coronavirus, right? And that we've seen sort of an uptick in cases. I know Adam Silver was even saying that they're sort of rethinking, right, the whole plan to go with Florida just because of all of the uptick in cases. That being said, I still hope that everything gets going as normal, gets going as planned, and I do hope that we see the NBA back in action soon.
Hey, if they can't do Florida, I mean, Austin, we're fine. I mean, I survived 6th Street the other week. I think I'm good to go after that. But all right, so fair enough. Anthony, I'm sure you're obviously excited about the relaunch plans. You said you had more of a deep dive take on kind of like the thoughts on it. I kind of want to hear your take on these subjects.
Right.
Just break it down.
So, it's just so we've never seen anything like this before. So it is really interesting how the league, set this up. They're going to start July 1st. The latest the season can go, Game 7 of the NBA Finals, is October 12th. The draft got shifted to August, and they're planning on starting the 2020-21 season December 1st. That's only giving them a month and a half to recover. Is that enough time? I don't know. And I'm pretty sure I heard that they're going to try to fit 82 games between December 1st and when the season would normally end. And I'm not exactly sure if that's going to be good for the league because there's already a problem trying to fit games in back-to-backs. And, you see players are getting hurt. Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, the whole resting situation. But as in regards to the playoff format, I think it's interesting. They know where the league stands. They know the top-heavy part of the league is in the Western Conference. So what they did was they took the teams that were 4 games out of the 8th spot. They put them into the playoffs. So there's 13 teams in the Western Conference, just 9 teams in the Eastern Conference. The 22 teams are going to play 8 regular season games. And where it gets interesting, why I think it's very, very interesting, if when the season ends, if there is a team who is 4 games out of the 8th spot, the 9th seed and the 8th seed have a play-in tournament, which is cool. So they do a best of 3, and whoever wins that gets the 8th spot. But like I said before, the point is I think that the teams that have the veteran presence on their teams, that's really who really has a shot. I think a real dark horse in this whole playoff is the Houston Rockets. Because what do we see every year? James Harden dies out in the playoffs. If you look at the statistics of his game by game in regards to a series, his game 1 performance completely outweighs the rest of the series. He uses, and listen, he's an MVP. He's put up crazy numbers. The man had a I think a 60-point triple-double against my Knicks. Oh my God. So he goes hard during the regular season. I think he needs to take a page from LeBron's book and maybe take a step back so he could save it for the playoffs. But teams like the Houston Rockets, who have veterans, who have 2 all-stars, they can really make some noise. Another team I like, even though they are young, is the Boston Celtics, just because they have so much talent, and Brad Stevens is, I think he's the best coach in basketball. He just, his team is always ready to play every single night. But like I said before, the Milwaukee Bucks, I wouldn't be surprised they come out of the gate a little, Giannis just had a kid. Maybe he's spending a little bit of time with him. He's not really, focusing, whatever it may be. It's going to be really interesting going forward, and I'm very excited to have basketball back. And hopefully, like Aundre said, with all the things with Florida, New York's fine. New York cases are going down, but I hope they continue with it. I know another thing he said was Jokic just got coronavirus. It's not possible if this thing goes on, we don't see somebody get COVID. How are they going to react to that? Are they going to shut it down like they did that one night in Oklahoma City with Rudy Gobert? How are they going to – I'm not exactly sure. That's going to be very interesting. People are going to be sitting out due to COVID-19. And then the thing with the ring situation, you guys have seen that, right?
I'm not familiar. Do tell on that one.
They're making this ring that the player's going to put on their finger, and it detects if they have coronavirus symptoms. I don't know if they're going to play with it. I don't know how they're going to manage the players wearing it the whole time. I don't know. I feel like rules are going to be broken. This could go really bad. It really could, especially because, Jokic gets coronavirus. We're a month away. What if this happened 3 days before and then he's supposed to play? It's going to be very interesting. We've never seen anything like this. We probably won't for another 50, 60 years, but I'm excited.
Well, it's definitely been a nice luxury that individual sports like the UFC have been able to isolate individual fighters in the event that they have come down with coronavirus symptoms. When it comes to the team dynamics, and I think part of the reason why they were so quick to just shut it down right away with Rudy Gobert is you have to test the whole team, you have to test the trainers, you have to test the facility. I think in terms of this bubble situation, you have to literally keep everyone separated so meticulously up until they have to practice together or play together. And if anyone ever steps outside of that bubble, out of that little community, then they need to also be severely monitored post that. And you mentioned people are going to break rules. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard doing all these little regulations, all these little steps to maintain the coronavirus, especially with the timelines being kind of like in limbo as they are. We did get a little bit of answers today, but even Dr. Fauci is still a little bit hesitant to declare a specific date. Dre, what do you believe in all this mess?
No, I mean, I don't have a whole lot more to add. Something else that I thought was interesting when it comes to rule breaking, though, is when it comes to these bigger market teams, something I've heard, especially like with the Lakers, is that right now they're able to practice, supposed to be unofficial, but I'm hearing rumors that they're able to practice at some dude's house, right, that has like a makeshift gym that looks like the Staples Center just because they live in LA and there's mansions there, right? Whereas if you think about like the Milwaukee Bucks is a good example, Giannis just had a kid. What gym is there that's open in Milwaukee that all these players can even get to, right? And so I do wonder how much of a dynamic that will add to it is like, hey, these bigger teams, right? Like nobody's going to tell an LA Laker, like, no, you got to stay out of the gym, or, these guys can go to somebody's house where they've got huge mansions and gyms and stuff like that. Whereas I think, out in Milwaukee, maybe things are a little bit more difficult, especially, Giannis probably has enough money. I would be surprised if he doesn't have like some form of basketball gym in his house. But some of the other lower paid players, right, that are maybe they've got a nice house. Yeah, maybe they have a hoop outside, but, it's nothing compared to let's say the Lakers or some of the Knicks players or something like that are able to have. So I do think that's interesting. And yeah, I really am excited about the 9th and 8th seed sort of play in. I think that adds a little bit to like the NCAA dynamic. I know a lot of people have always said like, oh, I wish there was sort of an NCAA tournament for basketball, right, where it's just a one game go. I'm glad they don't do that for basketball in determining the actual champ, but I do think it adds an interesting dynamic.
What did you think of Anthony's dark horse teams, the Celtics and the Rockets? Two small ball lineups, but highly efficient, decent. I mean, Brad Stevens, good coach. Mark D'Antoni, questionably good coach. But, depends on how tight their rotations are, I suppose. What do you make of those two teams?
No, I think the logic is sound behind those two being a dark horse team. And I think especially when it comes to the burnout that we see when it comes to the beard down in Houston, is that James Harden, like, he's able, to now have been rested and he can fully execute using his athleticism and his talents now that we're getting into sort of the last half of the season, or I guess 8 games, right, and into the playoffs. So I think that's actually a really good dark horse team. I still worry that it is too small ballish, and at the end of the day, right, him and Westbrook didn't work out the first time. So I still worry that, like, can they really make that big of a difference? Like, can they overcome that gap when it's him and Westbrook just 2.0 essentially? But I would not be surprised if they did make a pretty good little run. And then your Celtics are always formidable, Juju. I do wonder about, the changing of the setup this year, right? Depending on how they seed the brackets, if they're not doing just East versus West. I think the Celtics do have a little bit of a harder time going through that format. I think they've benefited a lot from just sort of being big brother in the East, not like Cleveland was necessarily, but I do think that Brad Stevens has the number of a lot of teams in the East and can just easily, like, hey, we're just going to out game plan them. We played them so much. Whereas I think if they meet up with some of the West Coast teams right off the bat or early in the tournament, I think they have a little bit more of a difficult time. But that being said, I still think that they're talented enough, and I think they're well coached, they're a well-run organization that they can definitely make some noise and possibly even win the whole thing later on down the road.
I'm trying to hide my bias on that take, so I'm not going hard on any Celtics takes. I'll let you guys say the good stuff for me on that regard. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm excited to see how it goes. I do think, I will say this on the Celtics take, they're good, but I don't think that they're ready to take on that Bucks team. I feel as though Giannis just does a good job of eliminating, like, Jason Tatum, and it's going to be interesting to see if Kemba Walker could kind of, take over that main scoring role in those situations, because Kyrie tried to do that last year, and Kyrie turned into Russell Westbrook at points. And speaking of your other team that you put out there, they have Russell Westbrook, and I've seen Russell Westbrook kind of collapse in the first round the last 2 years. So I guess that's kind of like hard for me to get behind the Rockets overall. Not to mention this whole size element too. It's just something we haven't seen before, and we don't really know how effective it's going to be in that postseason format. But yeah.
I think if I could comment on that, I think just with the Rockets, just Harden being rested, and I don't know if you guys saw it, he lost a lot of weight. James Harden, he lost a lot of weight. So I like that. And now that he's literally had, by the time the season starts, 4.5 months off. And you know how Harden explodes in the beginning of the season. He's rested. Now Westbrook's got Harden with him. He's got another MVP on his side, which he didn't have when he was, being an MVP in Oklahoma City Thunder after Durant left. And then the Celtics, I agree with you on that. I tell my co-host Bobby, he's a Celtics fan too. The Celtics are such a good team. They're such a good team. The problem is that Giannis is in their conference and they have nobody to guard him. Nobody can guard him. I'm sorry. Well, nobody can. I don't think anybody can guard him in general, but especially on the Celtics. Like, Jason Tatum is 21 years old. Jaylen Brown is 21 years old. Giannis is 25, but he is a man amongst boys. He like, the man is just chiseled head to toe. Nobody is guarding him. You can't put a center on him. You can't put a guard on him. And, I don't really like Tatum on him. So I agree with that. If somehow the Celtics wouldn't be able to run into the Bucks, they'd be in the finals for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that closes it up for the NBA. So let's get into the NFL. So a couple quick headlines, a couple quick hits here. So the ownership group has changed. Well, not kind of. I mean, it's still within the Ford family, but the Detroit Lions are no longer ran by Miss Martha Ford. She has transferred over controls to another family member. If you're a Lions fan, it doesn't really make a difference. Enjoy being last in the NFC North. Moving on to other topics that have been ran into the ground, Dak Prescott has officially signed his franchise tag. So he is now $31 million richer. Now, Dak, I don't know how you're going to be able to support your family on 31, man. I mean, gosh, that's just so low. But, my thoughts and prayers are getting sent your way. Let's see if that 4 or 5 year deal works out for you. Any quick thoughts on, the Dak Prescott situation, guys?
Yeah, I can go first. So I'm a Giants fan. I hate the Cowboys. And Juju, what's your team?
I am a proud San Francisco 49ers fan.
And what about you, Andre?
I'm a Steelers fan.
Okay, cool. Wow, I'm a Giants fan, like 3 of the greatest franchises ever. But anyway, so listen, I'm a Giants fan. I hate the Cowboys, but I just think Dak is extremely underrated. I mean, the man threw for almost 5,000 yards last year, 30 touchdowns, 11 picks on a dysfunctional team. Absolutely dysfunctional team. They have so much talent, and Jason Garrett absolutely overstayed his welcome. I mean, if I'm a Cowboys fan, he's on the Giants now, but I'm kissing the ground that he's not my head coach anymore. You pay your wide receiver. Like, they're lucky he signed the franchise tender, number one. And number two, I know they have about, give it 3 weeks until the July 15th they have to make a deal by. Is this man going to play? Is he going to sit out? I mean, I don't really know what's going to happen. I just think you had a seamless transition from Tony Romo to Dak Prescott. Seamless. Teams dream about that. You got to pay this man. Like, this guy, I think he's just so underrated. He gets a bad reputation because he's the starting quarterback for the most dysfunctional organization, maybe in sports. But I don't know. I would have paid this guy. I mean, I know you traded a first-round pick for Cooper, but I don't know. You got to pay this guy first. I'm sorry. That's my take.
I feel, though, just real quick here, we have to talk about that term, pay this man. You know, like, he is getting paid. He's getting paid $31 million this year, and reportedly has been offered a 4-year deal that would have made him $33 million a year on average. And even if that is based off how quickly the quarterback market is rising year by year, that still is more than generous for the results we've seen to this point. At this point, they do have 1 playoff win, so that's great. But we also are coming off an 8-8 year, and he threw for 5,000 yards, but he also got to play the Giants twice, so there is that. So, I mean, you do have to consider this when it is a Dak Prescott contract. And I know if you're the Chiefs, you're looking at what's going on with his deal, and you're thinking to yourself, don't you do it, Jerry Jones. Don't you pay him $40 million, because if they do that, then that Patrick Mahomes deal, God help us, that is going to be close to $50 million. If you're saying Dak Prescott's worth 40, what are you saying Patrick Mahomes worth? So, I mean, that's my little soapbox there on the Dak Prescott. What about you, Dre?
Yeah, I'm sort of right down the middle. I lean more towards you, Juju, in the fact that I don't think Dak has proven himself to be one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. Yes, he was able to get them to the playoffs and all of this stuff, playoff wins, yada, yada, yada. He had a pretty decent season. I still don't see the accuracy from him that I would like to of like a really high paid quarterback, especially at range. I think he's very limited. He needed Amari Cooper to really help him. The one season that they traded for Cooper, you could see a huge difference in the stats. He also benefits quite a bit from like the line and Zeke. So for all of those reasons, I'm like, is Dak really worth it? But that being said, like, look at the quarterback market right now as well. And so it's like, is Dak better than Kirk Cousins? I think he probably is. I would say that I think that he is.
Both have won a playoff game in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I don't know. I still think that Dak is better than Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is getting paid, so then it's like, well, what other quarterback are you really going to get that's proven? Like, yeah, you could take your chances in the draft, but you know that Aaron Rodgers isn't coming to you, and he's already got his deal. Mahomes is already taken for. Chiefs are paying him. Like I said, Kirk Cousins just got paid. Up in Seattle, Russell Wilson's, he's getting paid. Lamar Jackson's not going anywhere anytime soon. So,
Cam's a free agent.
Cam is a free agent.
Signed Andy Dalton.
You signed Andy Dalton, but still, like, I would still argue that Dak, the Cam Newton one is interesting, coming off of an injury. At his prime, Cam was better than Dak. But now that you've seen all these injuries, he hasn't really played in a year. I would still argue that Dak is the best out of those three, and probably the best available quarterback on the market. So it's hard. I think a lot of it comes down to a timing issue, right? Of like, hey, it just happened that he had a shorter contract due to where he was taken in the draft, right? So it's like, what's our best option? Do we pay him when all of the good quarterbacks are sort of taken off the market? Or do we try to franchise tag him and extend it out a little bit more?
Anthony, you want to rebut?
Yeah, I'll touch on that quick because I see your guys' point, and I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just that, if I'm, part of the Cowboys front office, I don't want any bad blood between me and my quarterback. I mean, what do you think Dak Prescott is really thinking right now when you pay all these other people and you don't pay the most important position arguably in sports? The guy made the Pro Bowl twice. He was the Offensive Player of the Year in 2016. And, the Cowboys, the thing with them is, like, you're going to go 8-8. Like, worst case scenario, they go 8-8 like they did last year, or they do better. You're going to pick 15 to 25 in the draft. You want to let this guy walk for nothing and then just, take a shot just in that part of the draft? I just think that another thing, this guy's 26 years old. He's got the best offensive line in football. He's got a great running back. I just think you had to take care of this man first. And I know you said with the money and stuff like that, but the contracts are just going to keep going up and up and up. It's honestly might even be better if he got paid before Mahomes, because if Mahomes got his deal done, they might be like, maybe I could, prorate it, whatever. So it's a tough situation. And I don't know who said it. I think it was Aundre. Bad timing. It is bad timing. I mean, it's never really a good time when one of these guys has to get paid, but it's a sticky situation. But the Cowboys always seem to screw it up. So
yeah,
I'm excited to see what happens next year.
It's also the nature of the beast, though, because this is a cap sport. So, like, when you do pay your quarterback, you're accepting that you're going to have to sacrifice at other key positions. And part of the Cowboys' bread and butter has been keeping together a veteran offensive line. Well, it gets harder to do that when you're paying Dak Prescott that big a portion of your salary cap. They have Amari Cooper there. That's great. Zeke, who knows if he's running – last year was his lowest productive year of his career to this point. Who knows how much longer he has in the tank. So when you start stripping away those pieces, the tough thing is when Mahomes gets paid for the Chiefs, then you're telling yourself that, okay, well, we're not going to be re-signing Travis Kelce in a couple of years. It's going to get real tight on re-signing Tyreek Hill. And I think at least Mahomes, I know he is a good enough talent that he can overcome some of those losses. I don't know if Dak is a good enough talent to overcome not having the key pieces around him. That is my biggest concern with paying Dak, quote unquote, paying Dak. Because, again, if we're settling at $33 million, you pay Dak. That's my thought on it. But, if you want to capitalize on Dak's rookie contract as it is right now, his franchise tender as it is right now, you might as well get the most weapons you can for him. So why not get a Pro Bowl caliber safety, one that was drafted a few years ago, one Mr. Jamal Adams, currently of the New York Jets, but who knows for how long, as he has made it a point to say he wants out. He has listed several teams on that list: the Ravens, the Niners, the Cowboys, probably the most notable, as a fan interacted with him actually out of his vehicle this past week. And when asked, hey, are you coming to Dallas? He said, bro, I'm trying to. So we know where Jamal's head is at. Now, as a New Yorker yourself, Anthony, I'm sure you have probably the best take, as you were closest to the situation. Even though you cheer for the other team in the Meadowlands, you have an opinion on the Jets.
Right. So that was a great segue with the Jamal Adams thing. That was great. But I'm a Giants fan, but it always seems like the Jets – I told you guys, I think it was off air. The Jets are just always in the news. They cannot stay out of it. And the thing with this man that I want to say is – also, I don't know if you mentioned – I think he said the Seahawks were an option too. But the thing with this guy is he's a playmaker. He is a hell of a football player, and I like his game a lot. The problem is he wants $20 million a year, okay? And if I'm the Jets front office, my point is I don't want my safety, who, in my opinion, is not as important as some of the other positions on the football field. It's just not. I think the position has become a little obsolete, especially for him because he's a box safety. That's what he is. He makes plays, which is great. It looks great. It looks great for the highlight tape. But for a safety to take, a fifth to a sixth of your cap, like you said, the National Football League is a hard cap. That doesn't really do it for me. So, honestly, he belongs in Dallas. You know why? Because he can't keep his mouth shut. Can't keep his mouth shut. He's always in the headline for the wrong things. Okay? You never hear him talking about just winning football games, talking about his money. I know McCaffrey just got paid, but that's a different situation over in Carolina. This man, and if I'm the Jets, if I'm a Jets fan, I'm saying goodbye. I'm waving my hand for everyone that can't see me. I'm waving my hand. Goodbye. We'll see you later. We'll take our first-round pick and our solid offensive lineman, and we'll ship you away because we got a quarterback that needs to get paid. We got to pay our quarterback. That's priority number one. That's my take. Honestly, I wouldn't doubt if he ends up in Dallas.
Yeah, it's hard to justify paying a safety that much when you were 7-9 with him. It's how much of a difference are you making in the win-loss column? Dre, in general, what do you think of the precedent, though, of a player following his third season wanting to either, one, get paid or two, get traded?
Yeah, I think it's sort of concerning, right? As, you know, just any team looking at this it's almost like the Antonio Brown situation, right? Of like, hey, this sort of starts to reek of like a prima donna, right? Of like, hey, you have to do what I want you to do, right? You have to pay me how much I want you to pay me. You have to trade me where I want to be traded. And so if I'm a general manager or an owner or whatever, right, I would be a little bit worried. As a coach, I'd be a little bit worried as well of like, hey, you know, is this going to be an issue when it comes to behavior? Because we've seen like, yes, there can be extremely talented players, and sometimes it's worth it to put up with those headaches. But, you know, like you guys were sort of saying, the impact of a safety, he could be the best safety in the world, but is it worth some of the behavioral issues that you may have to deal with? And I would argue that it's probably not at that position. And then, you know, it's kind of funny, Anthony saying like, hey, he belongs in Dallas, send him there. Like, I think that would be good. I'd actually look at the Houston Texans to be like, hey, what are you guys willing to trade? Because they're willing to give up everything for any piece, right? So, but no, I do think that he'll eventually be out of New York and, you know, into another market somewhere.
Unnamed source has named Jamal Adams a turd, quote unquote. So I think that kind of tells you how people around the league feel about him. He's talented, don't get me wrong, but you mentioned it exactly, Anthony. He is a box safety, not necessarily a cover safety, which is definitely more desirable as you look at the shifting way that the game is played. I mean, look at like even modern linebackers. You don't see any of those big hitters anymore. You don't see Patrick Willis as much. You see guys that could hang with the tight end in coverage. And I don't think Jamal Adams necessarily fits that role. There's a lot of teams. It's funny, the teams that he all mentioned, though, are all teams that are at the top of the league, top of the standings. And the bad part about wanting to be on a good team is the good teams are the most cash-strapped. You know, they're the teams that have the most limited budget to necessarily pay him. And that's why it's almost impossible to trade him. Because even if you trade him, you're not just trading for Jamal Adams. You're trading for Jamal Adams and a new contract. That's the hardest thing to do if you're an NFL executive, because you're looking at your team. It's like, well, shit, if you're the Chiefs, I got to pay Mahomes. You know, if you're the Niners, I'm dealing with this $20 million potential George Kittle contract right now. Do I want to bring in a safety and then not be able to sign Kittle? Even especially a safety that potentially, like you mentioned, is a bit of a character problem. So that's definitely a little bit concerning to me when that's kind of the narrative built around Jamal. And yeah, I just think safeties, just look at the good teams around the league. A lot of their safeties drafted in the third round, fourth round. Not necessarily a lot of top 10 drafted safeties.
He's expendable. And I'm reading this right now. The highest paid safety in the league is Eddie Jackson of the Bears, $14.5 million. And you want 20. Well, yeah. What a jump that is, you know?
I'm kind of wondering where some of these agents are getting these numbers, because I mentioned George Kittle. As much as I love Kittle, and he's the heart and soul of the Niners, I would not pay him $20 million. Want to know why? Because the next highest paid tight end is $10 million. So you're telling me you're twice as good as Austin Hooper. And I think he's a better player than Austin Hooper, but he's not twice as good as Austin Hooper. Literally double the receptions, double everything. That just doesn't equate. Similar to Jamal Adams, like you said, that's $6 million. That's a huge difference. I mean, what's Derwin James going to get paid when he's up for his contract? When you're paying Jamal Adams that, And unless the cap goes up significantly, and by the way, even just talking about the cap, it's more likely to go down following this COVID situation, if anything, because they're not making as much money this year. They're not filling up the stadiums. The TV deal is still going to be great, but don't underestimate how much money you make by having fans in those stands, especially when you're a new stadium like Vegas or Inglewood. That's a huge chunk of change that you're going to have to eat this year. So, I don't know. Jamal Adams, over the chances that he's legitimately traded out of the Jets, I think you have to get rid of him. I don't think there's anything you can really do when you have a player that so publicly announces that they want out. But if you're a team trading for Jamal Adams, like you mentioned, like what are you really giving for him? Are you giving him a straight up first round pick to get this troubled safety that wants a $20 million deal? I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it, especially if I'm on the good teams. Yeah.
Listen, if there's a team out there, I said maybe a solid offensive lineman and a first round pick. If you can get, a solid player, a second round pick, I mean, the guy doesn't want to play for you. So at this point, he's worthless. I mean, you have to take his word and say and be of the mindset that this man is not going to play for us in September, and you got to do it now. You got to do it right now, because I could see the season goes on and they just end up signing him because we need him and there's not a market for him anymore. Because he doesn't want to play. But McCaffrey got paid. He's getting $16 million a year, so he sees that. I think they were in the same draft class, right?
Yeah, they were.
2017.
McCaffrey was, I believe, drafted 3 picks behind him.
Right. And then, dude, George Kittle is one of my favorite players in the league. And that situation is really, really tough. I get the whole money thing, but he is legitimately the heart and soul of your team. Like he's more than a player. Like I love him. I love his attitude. But it's a business at the end of the day. I'm interested to see what they do with that.
When you sign here's the thing, when you sign a player to that deal, even the difference between $5 million, you're talking about 3 or 4 role players on that team. For the Niners specifically, that's K'Wan Williams. That's potentially a new Solomon Thomas deal. There's Trent Williams, the left tackle that they just traded for, that you just can't re-sign when you're paying a tight end $20 million a year. It's just one of those things. Why we have comparable contracts in the NFL is so we kind of have a baseline of somewhat what to pay people. And when you escalate these positions so severely, it makes it impossible to pay everyone else. I mean, like you said, if you're paying double a normal tight end contract, it's impossible. When you're paying double a safety contract and then the next guy in line comes around, whether that's Derwin James or Travis Kelce when his contract's up in 2 years, you can't operate as a team, or you can't operate as a good team specifically. You can pay these guys. You can pay these guys all you want, but finishing 6-10 versus being a complete team, making it to the playoffs year after year. Look at Belichick. He's not afraid to move off a good player. He traded Chandler Jones in his prime to the Arizona Cardinals. You could argue, are they better or worse for it? But, I mean, part of the luxury the Patriots at least had is they had a quarterback willing to eat money for several year after year after year. And that's one of those things. Hell, even Dre, you're a Steelers fan. Would you pay Minkah Fitzpatrick $20 million when his deal is up?
Heck no. And even as electrifying as he was for our defense this year, I really do think, at first when they announced the trade, I was like, I'm a little bit skeptical. I know Minkah's good. I really do think that he, in a sense, saved our season, right? I know we didn't make it to the playoffs like we had wanted. We're, 1 win out, and we're right there on the bubble. But I do think he electrified the defense. I do think that he gave us some life on that end. As good as, we've got some really good young guys anyways, right? Like we got Watt, and our linebacking core is pretty decent. But still, I think Minkah was definitely the heart and soul and rejuvenated us with, a lot of the receptions and pick sixes that he was able to bring back. And even with all that, there's no way. Like I would hesitate to make him the highest paid DB, and then especially for safeties, especially 20 mil. Like that's insane when the next person is 14 mil or whatever it is. It just doesn't make any economic sense when you're managing a team.
Yeah, it's always tough in these debates. It's like, are you pro player? Are you pro management? But if you're a fan, and I think this is where the NFL has the advantage, I think generally fans lean more pro management just because you want what's best for the uniform, not necessarily for the player. And that's, I think, one of those biggest disconnects in these contract debates. All right. Before we move on here, I just want to give a quick shout out to Razor Sport. That is RAZER sport.com. They have they're a worldwide sports betting network, have access to the latest and sharpest sports betting information. So I'm not an expert gambler. Thankfully, these guys are. They're going to get some money in your pocket. They're going to help you out. They're not going to tell you how much to bet, but they're going to tell you the right game to bet on, who you should put your money on. And like I said, these COVID checks, they've been a little light, So let's get some more money in your pocket. Let's work things out. These guys are here to help you out, get you ahead of the sharps out there in Vegas. They got a mixture of sports betting bots and crews of handicappers to produce the best plays out there. So that is Razor Sport, RAZER sport.com. Go ahead and check them out. All right, Anthony, halftime podcast.
Yes, sir.
Tell us actually, hold up. I always forget this, but we ask all our guests, every single one of them, favorite all-time sports movie. Tell me about it.
Put me on the spot here. But if I had to pick one off the top of my head, one that I really like a lot is, and I hope no one said this, but it's got to be Moneyball with Billy Beane.
Hey, you're a first. You're original.
Okay.
You're not a basic bitch on this show. So I appreciate
and it's very like the background of things, but it's based on a true story. I think the Oakland A's won a record number of games in a row, and they kind of just took these nobodies and made a team out of them. So that was really interesting. Brad Pitt's in it. Really good movie. So I'd probably say that one.
It's kind of funny after we just had this heated debate about contracts and how much you should pay players. You bring up Moneyball because that's literally the idea. It's like finding the best value for players. And Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, they knocked it out of the park with that one. I mean, Brad Pitt with his just smug thing. I don't think Billy Beane can ever look that good. So, it has to be the ultimate honor to have Brad Pitt play you in a movie. That's actually a fun question. Who would you have play you in a movie?
If I could pick, is it a sports movie or just
any movie? Like, if you could pick your favorite actor to play you, who are you going with?
I mean, is it a serious movie or is it like a comedy?
Let's just say it's your life. He's playing, the role of, Anthony. He wants to live your life. Who do you think could best represent you out there? Whether it's comedy or it's a drama. I don't know how you live your life, man.
Well, obviously he's a little bit older than me, but one guy I think just has swag and charisma is Daniel Craig, James Bond. He just makes anything look cool. So I feel like if I put him in there, I really can't do any wrong. And like I said, Brad Pitt, we actually have the same birthday, fun fact. He just makes everything look cool. So you can't go wrong with an actor like that.
Dre, who's playing your life story?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I would say Michael B. Jordan. I don't look as good as that man, but if there was a ripped Aundre that can act sometimes in comedy roles and comedic roles, can do a little bit of action movies, some serious drama, I would say Michael B. Jordan.
The tough thing is I'm trying to find a good Latino actor to do my life story, and unfortunately, I keep finding Danny Trejo. So, screw it. Machete. I'm okay with him representing my life. Be my later years as I go out to pasture. So long as he doesn't end out like Tortugas, out there from Breaking Bad. Because from Albuquerque. So it kind of fits that narrative a little. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Anthony, for real this time, halftime podcast, shameless plug times. Tell us about these shirts. Where to listen, how to listen, inform the viewing audience.
Sure thing, Juju. I gotcha. So I started halftime about 2 years ago, and when I did, one of the things I wanted to do was, I think when everyone starts something, you just want to create your own brand. So what I did was I created a logo that has just me and my two buddies on it, me, Joe, and Bobby. Slapped that. We made a cartoon version out of it, slapped it on a shirt, halftime podcast underneath it. And then I also have these cool shirts. I'm wearing them now. I know the listeners can't see. But it's just a referee with a hat. He's got his headphones on, and he's talking into the mic. Basically, if you go onto the halftime Instagram, if you click the link tree, the first link is the merchandise. You go right there. You get sent to teespring.com. We have the cartoon of me, Joe, and Bobby. We have the referee. They all come in short sleeve shirt, like the one I'm wearing, long sleeve shirt, hoodie, and tank top. Very fairly priced. So I recommend you go grab one. And like I said before, I'm going to try to we'll link up after the show. I'll see what you guys want. I'll try to get them out there.
Sounds like a plan, and look forward. Like I said, these shirts, they definitely slap. But we'll drop the links in our bio as well to, help these guys out. Dre, any MMA 101 to kind of discuss this week?
No, just coming up with more ideas. I've got all kinds of different ideas rolling around in my brain, right? And with a lot of the new upcoming UFC fights, I think it's going to be really interesting. Some interesting UFC news, actually, is Kamaru Usman just changed camps, right? So he and Gilbert Burns were at the same camp. Both were at Hard Knocks 365, I believe, down in Florida. And they're going to fight each other. And so I think that's really exciting. We're going to see Usman now training up in Denver, up at Elevation, which I find interesting that the champion would actually leave the gym, and then you have the challenger stay put. So I think that's interesting. But yeah, stay tuned for more MMA 101 to come.
Awesome. So go ahead and check out our most recent episode. We actually got a chance to talk to the fellas over there at Combat Hour. A great listen. Still a lot of relevant information in there as well. At Slumpbuster Podcast on IG, at Slumpbuster Pod on Twitter. Go ahead and use promo code SLUMP to get 20% off at manscaped.com and check out our sponsor, Razor Sport, RAZERsport.com. Find us on all major streaming platforms. And everyone out there, even though I hate the mask, I want you all to stay safe, happy, and healthy. And we'll see you on the next episode.